Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto, like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1350 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Pumpkins After Dark. Get your tickets now at pumpkinsafterdark.com. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Monaris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego, and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut, is Brad Giffen.
Yay!
Welcome, Brad is in the house. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing like $1 million US, Mike.
Ooh, that's real money.
Yeah. If I was any happier, I'd be a Disney character. It's good to see you.
Honestly, what a pleasure it is to see you. I don't know why it took me so long. You were like, I don't know. I was getting there. I was just getting to the G's.
It took me almost 40 years to be worthy to meet you. What a nice setup you have.
Okay, let's.
This is great. Can I ask you a couple of quick questions? You can say
anything. Ask me anything, and then share any praise you wish about the studio, and then we'll crack open our Great Lakes on the mic. Go ahead, Brad.
My question or my beer?
Well, you want to do the beer first? Let's do the beer real quick. So you do it on the mic. You got a lager from Great Lakes.
Today, putting aside my question for a quick sec, and any comments about your setup here in your studio. Okay. This is a Great Lakes Brewery product, and it's premium lager, ice cold.
On the mic, Brad, on the mic.
Just listen to this.
It sounds good, too good to be true. I'm going to do the same. I have an Octopus Wants to Fight IPA. So cheers, Brad. Cheers to you. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful to meet you, too.
Now I'm ready. Well, do you want to do the questions, or do you want to let the listenership know, what is it like when you see the studio for the first time? Like, are you underwhelmed, as Sloan would say? Are you, is it, tell me what you think,
It's
Brad.
A lovely studio. It's got 3 mics, 2 desks, a mixing board. You're working off a Mac. And what kind of mics are these?
Rode Procaster microphones.
Yeah, very good. Are these USB?
No, these are XLR, so they go into the board here, and then the board connects to the laptop via USB.
Oh, outstanding. Yeah. I have Neumann TLM 103 and a Sennheiser 416 at my place.
And I bet you with those pipes, they sound pretty damn good.
Well, that's the equipment part of it. I think a lot of voiceover people start turning into gearheads because they think the equipment's going to make them sound good. But
no, I wish.
You know what? It's really all about coaching. So that's where it comes
And you do
down.
a lot. I mean, I feel like I'm talking to Brad Giffen. That's who I'm talking to. But there's another gentleman you might know named Brad Avenyou.
Correct. Well, that's my voiceover name. That's my professional name now as I record
but
voiceovers.
What's your real name? Like, is that your
Giffen.
real name?
Giffen.
Okay, so Giffen's your real name. And that's, I mean, as you can imagine, I have Toronto Rocks questions up the wahoo here. But Brad Avenyou, you decided to, reinvent yourself for your voiceover career?
Well, tell you what, we'll get to that a little later on as we go through this
producing
somewhat.
the show.
Because I'm going to tell you,
yeah,
we're, as we sit, not too far away from where I was born.
Where were you born?
122 Hillside Avenue in Mimico.
Wow, Mimico boy, okay.
And my cousins live just 3 streets south of here.
Wow.
Or, not south of here. What am I saying? East of here.
East of here. Okay, closer to Mimico. Now, growing up in Mimico, did you play lacrosse?
It's funny you should mention that. So when my mom would get tired of my brother and sister and I fighting, she'd say, if you don't settle down, I'm going to sign you up for lacrosse. So that was always the great
That was the
punishment.
threat? That sounded like it was more of a treat, no?
No. No, for some reason it was not. Something to do with those hard sticks and those hard, small rubber balls. Right?
And those tough Mimico boys.
Yeah, those tough Mimico boys.
I mean,
exactly.
Brendan Shanahan's family. I mean, a lot of great lacrosse players come from Mimico.
When I was growing up, this was very much a separate town. New Toronto, Mimico, Alderwood,
Long Branch.
and we had our own police and fire, mayors. Oh yeah, it was pretty amazing. And then I think it was around 1967 it all became amalgamated into Etobicoke.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we were kind of independent until 67, then amalgamated into Etobicoke, and then 1998, Etobicoke gets amalgamated into Toronto, and here you are.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. You're from Mimico. I had no idea. So much ground to cover. But what were your questions? I don't want to forget. Do you have questions?
No, that was
okay.
it.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
I was just curious about your mics.
Okay.
What kind of a setup you use in this electronic
I was ready
palace
for
of
some
yours?
like deep dives here, and it's just you wanted to know. Yeah. Any questions at all? Anytime, Brad. I want to shout out a gentleman, a good FOTM, Joel Goldberg, because Joel's the guy who said you should have Brad on, and I'm like, firstly, I should just tell you, I loved Toronto Rocks. Like, I can't wait to talk about Toronto Rocks. And, as you know, sadly, I will never have John Major on the program.
True.
And JD Roberts is not returning my calls. And I'm thinking, Brad Giffen is now in my basement. This is a big deal. So I'm so excited.
It's, oh, gosh. Well, Joel is just a terrific guy. And we've been able to stay in contact throughout the years. And those years, gosh, almost coming up on, 35 years? Because I left Toronto Rocks. I was there from 1985 to 1988 before I went to CHUM-FM.
Right.
So that's how that worked. But Joel and I have been friends since. He's a terrific guy. Very talented.
And
very
because I know Joel's listening, I got to play a little drop for him.
Cool.
No Cleveland, no Bowie.
That's for Joel Goldberg, a Cleveland boy.
And Mike Williams doing that.
That's fellow Cleveland boy, Mike Williams. Again, everybody's calling him Mike. I had a guest yesterday. I'm going to talk to you about him in a minute. But
Michael Williams.
You're right. I said, can I call you? I'm a Michael. Okay, I like to be called Mike, but you can call me Michael. I won't get upset or anything. It's on my birth certificate. But I asked Mike straight out, can I call you Mike? Sorry, I asked Michael straight out. How about Mike? And he's like, I talk into a mic. My name is Michael.
Yeah, I like Michael's attitude. He suits Michael. My brother-in-law is a Michael, not a Mike. A Michael. My cousin Mike is a Mike.
Yeah, it's
Mike
different.
Giffen.
Yeah.
Michael Wheeler. Well,
it's interesting how that all folds out.
Family, I know. Brenda, Bradley, Randy. But we all, you choose the name. I was called Bradley usually by my aunts when they were angry at me. But I kind of grew into the name. And so now my closest friends call me Bradley. But I still go by Brad.
Have you heard an episode of Toronto Mic'd in your time?
Yeah, I've heard one or two. Yes, indeed. I really enjoyed your conversation with Dan Matheson, for instance, and Lance Chilton, and, of course, Joel's.
Right.
You've done some terrific you've had some great conversations with some really impressive people. And, all you have to do is go into your podcast full show to see how many people you've spoken with.
And finally, I'm adding Brad Giffen to the list.
Well,
better late than never. So 2 days ago, we're talking on a Wednesday, but Monday, I was visited by a gentleman named Jonathan Gross. In your professional life, did you cross paths with Jonathan Gross?
I did not.
Okay, so he was writing about rock for the Toronto Sun, but then he actually had a spurt.
I certainly knew of Jonathan, but no.
Never met the man.
Him personally, no.
I believe he took over for John Major on a show on CFMT called Video Singles.
Brave.
When I recorded with Jonathan, I thought maybe he was replaced by Jonathan Major, but some subsequent research I did, I kind of dove in. It sounds like basically John Major is the first host of Video Singles, and then Jonathan Gross takes over at some point when John Major probably, like I'm guessing, moved on to maybe Toronto Rocks. Like, are you able to definitively give me the history of Toronto Rocks? Like who are you before Toronto Rocks? And I'm gonna just shut up and listen. Oh, and you know what? Do you want to listen to some nostalgic Toronto Rocks audio to kind of set the stage here? I pulled some clips. You want to hear some Toronto Rocks?
Sure.
Okay, let's do this.
To Toronto Rocks, I'm Brad Giffen. We have the distinct pleasure to be able to announce the audition results from the High School Star Search 88. Paul Johnson and the gang there have done a terrific job, and these are the bands that are going to be appearing. The High School Star Search 88 at the end of January 1988. Pelican west of Toronto, Something in Between from Toronto. From Georgetown, it's First Class. After Hours from Toronto, Polyester Breakfast from Mississauga, Blues Review from Toronto, Downstream from Toronto, Waiting for Jane from Ridgeville, Blue Jam and the Electric Toasters from Etobicoke, The Changeling from Richmond Hill, There for Three from Toronto, and Tempest Fugit from Toronto. And congratulations to all of those bands. These bands are all once again confirmed to play at the end of January in the 4th annual High School Star Search, and specific dates and times of performance will be announced as we get closer to that. So for a lot of friends and fans of those bands, we're eagerly awaiting that High School Star Search.
I was listening to the names of these bands, wondering if any of these bands made it big. I didn't recognize any of those names. It'd be kind of fun if we hear that and it's like, oh, you know, this band, and like Blue Rodeo, whatever. But here, I actually started with the wrong Toronto Rocks clip. This is the one I wanted to start with.
Just about ready here. Okay, 401 Toronto Rocks is where you got it. Brad Giffen with you here. And hey, how are you doing? We got a great show for you today. Let's get fully adjusted here. Okay, all set. Got coming up on the show.
That's a microphone I'm
chance
adjusting.
for you to have a summer full of music in the Music World Toronto Rocks Summer Full of Music contest. Also on the way, Level 42, Stones, the latest one from Simply Red on the way in this first half hour, and Honeymoon Suite. And some big news on Wham we're going to tell you about in a second. But first of all, I am your man, and this is Wham from Toronto Rocks. Wham on Toronto.
You know, I honestly, Brad, if this episode was only you and I listening together to this episode from who knows what, mid-'80s, but here, I'll bring you down from the 80s and listen to you in 2023 tell me everything. Bury me in detail. This is like the definitive Toronto Rocks. Like, again, John Major's never coming on the show, sadly. Shout out to Rayleigh Funeral. Lost him too young. We'll talk about that. But, of course, J.D. Roberts is now on Fox News. I don't get a sense he's nostalgic for his, Much Music days or even...
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know?
Oh,
you ever hear from J.D. Roberts?
Sure. Yeah, from time to time. It's
right. Tell him Toronto Mike's looking for him. But your turn.
Sure.
Who were you? How did you end up on Toronto Rocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, Toronto Rocks came about midway into my career. I had already been 10 years into a career that started with radio in Lindsay, Ontario.
Okay.
And from there went to Peterborough, and then from there back to Toronto, where I was born, got into commercial work. Anyway, so speed forward a few years, couple more years at this point. I'm with the CBC, and I'm doing a limited 18-part series called Rock Wars. And Rock Wars, also, its duties included filling in for Terry David Mulligan on Good Rocking Tonight, and also Samantha Taylor's video hits. Now, go back to Peterborough. John Major, I became acquainted with John back in about 1977. And I had the audacity to contact him and Roger Ashby and Nevin Grant at CKOC in Hamilton. And I said, this is where I'm at. I'm, beginner. And I wonder if you would critique my air checks, please. And all three of them did. But John went the extra step. John Major went the extra step. And he said, whenever you're in Toronto, man, come on in and come over to my place over on Merton Street at the time. And I think his wife's name was Dion. Yeah. So John and Dion would have me over to the house. And I mean, honest to God, it was like walking amongst giants, to be with John Major and later to meet some unbelievable people like Terry Steele and Scott Carpenter, who, Pat Bergen on your show.
Right.
One of your guests. And on and on and on. But John was just so particularly generous with his advice and even with opportunities, one of which was when Toronto Rocks was about to become available, because John was going to go back to the morning show on 1050 CHUM.
Right.
1050
from whence he came.
CHUM. not the morning show. He'd been doing, I think, Afternoon Drive.
Right.
So he had the opportunity to work at 10:50 CHUM and in the morning. So he said, would you be interested? And I said, I don't know. Would I be interested in, filling his shoes on Toronto Rock? To me, the idea was laughable. I thought, there's no way. And he says, no, you can do this. You really can. And I said, well, I'll give it a try. Where do we start? And he says, well, I'm going to introduce you to John Martin and a few of the others who are going to make the decision. And the story of John Martin. Okay, so you know him, Manchester, thick accent. And John Major says to me, now all you have to do is just answer John's questions. And, in the end, if you can just keep him playing his crossword puzzle, he'll be perfectly happy. Just keep it like that and fly under the radar. And so I said, okay. So we sat down at a bar next door to City TV. Well, that was John's office. It was called X-Rays, co-owned by Dan Aykroyd, by the way.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah. X-Rays. So we sat down at the bar, John Martin, John Major, Gene Bushy, me, and I'm not sure, there might have been one or two others. They're kind of at a distance looking at this guy who was proposing to take over for John Major. And this is 1985. And John, of course, with his strong Manchester accent. You're a and I've worked at CBC, sir. Well, yeah, of course, it's yeah, I've done that as well. Yeah. Well, and John turns to me and he says, well, you've got the job. And all the time there was a beer bottle spinning, and it was almost like spin the bottle, kind of like, will he be the host or will he not? Right. But anyway, so that was my interview at X-Rays, and I think it lasted about a half an hour. And so I started soon after and was enjoying it right from the start. I was amazed by how, first of all, the people that I was working with were just so top-notch, and there were guerrilla TV, if you know what I mean, because there was a whole, Aryan thing happening on all the other television stations at that time, and that was one of the great things about Moses, was that he was totally against the grain when it came to hiring people that were totally against the previous typecast of television types in Toronto. So anyway, we've got this show that's being run by these incredibly talented, rebellious people. And I just couldn't believe my good luck. So anyway, long story short, 1.5 years of the old building, 99 Queen Street East, and 1.5 years at the new building, as we used to call it, 299 Queen Street West. And I tell you, I had the good fortune to work back. When I look back on the people that I worked with, I mean, from that time, not only was there John Major, but there was also John Roberts. He was a great help in the early part of my career as well, J.D. Roberts. John Roberts. John Martin, we mentioned Mike Rhodes, Joel, of course, who took over for Mike Rhodes when Rhodes went to Mike and Mike's excellent cross-Canada adventure with Mike Campbell.
FOTM wow. Mike Campbell.
Whole lot of Mikes in here. Janice Groom, who was the director, Francis Bartlett, who succeeded Janice Groom, and Nancy Malik, Sharon Cavanaugh, Peggy Rennick. And Peggy Rennick was just so sweet. We just had a wonderful time together. It was just a lot of fun. And then all good things have to come to an end, and that was 1988. And that's when I went to CHUM-FM.
Okay, when does Toronto Rocks end?
Well, I don't really know, to be honest with you.
Do you know who hosted after you?
Yeah, it was Lance Chilton. Really nice gentleman.
Hey.
Now, Lance, I believe, was doing entertainment with City Pulse. I didn't know Lance at the time. He's one of many people I wish I'd got to know better during those years. But, you get crazy, you're doing stuff and jumping up and down, and next thing you know, you can't remember anybody's name. or you haven't met them. And that was the case with Lance. Great guy. Really enjoyed his interview, by the way.
Yeah, that was a remote, and I typically don't enjoy remotes, but I thought that was pretty damn good. Next
really
time I have
was.
Lance on, though, he's got to be sitting in the basement. He knows it too.
But the end came, and it's funny because I didn't know the answer to that very question. My girlfriend, Liliana Reyes, asked me, so how did Toronto Rocks end?
Right.
And I said, I don't think I know. So what I did was I sent a message to Joel, and we had a quick little conversation. I said, Joel, this is going to sound funny considering, how long ago 1988 is, but what happened to Toronto Rocks after I left? He said, well, it went to Lance. And why did it end for me? And he said, well, they were taking another direction. They wanted to add more comedy or interviews or something like that. And I said, was the show dying? And he said, no, but Much Music had always been available. And throughout the years, Toronto Rocks viewers, well, they didn't have to wait until 4 o'clock anymore
right.
to see their favorite
that happened to
videos.
me. That happened to me. Like Much Music killed Toronto Rocks for me. Yeah.
Okay. So that's more or less what happened. So the audience leached away rightfully, to Much Music.
Same ownership.
Leaving a decision to be made about Toronto Rocks. It's going to have to change. Or as my biology teacher, Mr. Below, used to say, evolve or die. And so...
What school was that, by the way?
Martin Grove Collegiate.
Oh, yeah. Okay. My daughter used to do dance recitals at Martin Grove, my oldest daughter.
How interesting.
Yeah.
How old is she now?
19.
Oh.
She's at McGill right now in
that's
Montreal.
wonderful.
Yeah.
But we digress.
That's what we do in Toronto, Mike.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's more or less the long and the short of the story. So Lance took over that part as Toronto Rocks, as Joel explained to me, transitioned to this new format of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of interviews, and a little bit of music and whatnot, to make it distinct from Much Music. I, unfortunately, wasn't really aware of that because almost at the same time that I learned Toronto Rocks was going to pass into other hands, I was invited to go to CHUM-FM. I can't tell you the magnitude of that invitation. Remember, I had started in radio, and I had, by 1980, pretty much given up that I would ever be at 1331 Yonge Street, the CHUM headquarters,
right, of course.
for both AM and FM.
Condos now, right?
Yeah. And to get that invitation was like an invitation from a biblical figure. This was Ron Waters, one of the Waters family, scions. And I said, sure. Well, you just go up and talk to Ross Davies, who was just wonderful throughout those 3 years that I was at CHUM-FM, who, brought me and fine-tuned me to the CHUM-FM way of doing things and speaking and so on. Ross Davies was just invaluable to me. And I've had a lot of these guardian angels throughout my career, whether it be John Major, Ross Davies, Paul Rogers at CFTO, people who have reached out and pulled me to them, in some cases pulled me up. And I don't know that I've ever really properly expressed my gratitude to those people, but I thank you, each and every one of you.
You got great pipes. Do you know this? Like I'm listening in the headphones right now, and I'm like, why can't I sound like Brad Giffen? Listen to yourself. You ever just listen to yourself?
That's illegal in 27 states.
Right. And another thing, I'm thinking, people like, hey, hi, I'm Brad Giffen, and they're like, no, because Brad Giffen has like dark hair. You have white hair.
I do. Yeah, I do.
So when did that like when did the white hair show up? You're kind of frozen in time for. I mean,
Yeah.
Bobby, we'll get to your CTV
My
News.
first mortgage actually did it. My daughter was born in 1987. I'm not saying that she was the cause of white hair. My dad started turning.
But did you dye
white
it for a
hair.
while?
Yeah.
So because I don't remember. At what point did you realize I'm a white-haired, handsome guy? I don't need to be a, I feel like Colin James was on the program and he talked about the moment he had where he said he started looking like a magician. This is what he told me. And he's like, he realized, no, just go gray. Just go gray. So at some point
Like a
you had the
magician.
same epiphany.
No, not exactly. So I guess there was a little bit of, I don't know. Can't really remember. During Toronto Rocks, there wasn't much gray to speak of. But by the time I got to Salt Lake City, which was 1993, Salt Lake City and Fox, I was starting to turn gray. So hair.
Wait.
all
So
that
hold
kind
on
of
here.
stuff was
Salt Lake
part of
City.
the contract.
This is post CHUM-FM.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So look, let's go. Okay. So
Okay,
I'm
we'll
still,
tell you what.
I'm-
I'll give you the quick.
Well-
the quick run through.
Or let me finish with Toronto Rocks. Didn't you know, Brad, you're here for 2 hours about Toronto Rocks? Was I not clear about that?
2 hours.
No, I'm just kidding.
Good
I kid with you.
Lord.
I kid with you. But I want to just get this right. My brain needs to wrap around it. So the original host of Toronto Rocks is John Major, right?
Correct.
Okay. So was J.D. Roberts ever a regular host, or was he like the fill-in guy for John Major?
Occasionally filled in.
Okay, so my memory, and again, apologies to FOTM Lance Chilton, but I don't remember Lance on Toronto Rocks, but I think I had switched to Much Music.
I think Lance
88
would have been 88 to
90.
however long Toronto Rocks, and then it morphed into something else.
Oh yeah, so Toronto Rocks, I think
Another show, Electric Circus or whatever.
another Joel Goldberg creation. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's get this right. So
He's
John
got
Major,
a million shows in him, that guy.
he sure does. John Major, first host of Toronto Rocks, and again, for guys like me, for whatever, us young kids, we don't choose our cable packages. Okay, it's like whatever our parents pay for, that's what's coming out for it. So I didn't get Much Music for a number of years. I think it was it was a few years of Much Music airing. I think it debuts in 1984. Did you see the 299 Queen Street doc yet?
No.
Okay. So I feel like I know way too much about the history of Much Music at this point, but it was a few years in the running before it got to my eyeballs. Okay, so I missed, for example, Catherine McClenahan. Do you know that name?
I do. I know she's an FOTM as well.
First woman VJ in Much Music history, and I never saw her because I didn't have it at that point. So John Major, I would watch after school. I'd watch him on Toronto Rocks. Big deal to me.
Yeah.
John Major, like you mentioned, he got the opportunity to go back to 1050 CHUM. Say that again in your great pipes.
1050 CHUM.
Wow.
So he really wanted to take that morning show. He
Sure.
had never really disassociated himself from CHUM, right? You understand? And even at Toronto Rocks, that was part of the CHUM group as well.
Yeah, of course.
So, it was all one family. So John had the opportunity to host the morning show. He was great, too, by the way. This is a very nomadic business, though. And within a couple of years, I think he had picked up sticks to start a show with a woman named Heidi Bohé in Los Angeles. LA at Night was the name of the program. That was 1986, I believe. So
he left the country, left us
87.
behind here.
he was
And-
from the States, so he crossed the border quite easily.
Right. And of course, he sadly passed away far too young. He was only 53 years old when he died.
2007, January.
Did you get a chance to talk to John before he passed?
I did. Yeah, many times.
I can only imagine. My condolences to you to lose a friend and a mentor at the young age of I can see
53.
like that's in your rearview mirror there, Brad. But I can see it from here. Like it's like 53. That's way too damn young.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so when he leaves, you take over, and then when you are...
When he leaves for CHUM.
When he leaves for 1050 CHUM,
Yeah.
you take over Toronto Rocks. It's Brad Giffen's the host.
Really, I didn't really take over for John. I just kind of warmed the seat. There was nobody that could ever take over for John. And he just more or less handpicked me and said, here, just sit in the seat and keep it warm.
But I guess the boss was John Martin. So I know, Moses is the boss, I suppose. But
Yeah.
he's the executive producer of everything, as I learned. I only recently met him for the first time. How was your relationship with Moses Znaimer?
Never met him except once socially and once professionally. Once socially and professionally, it was just to go up to his office that I had to ask where it is and thank him before I left. So those were the only two
But that's a bit of a mind blow, I think. I would think the reputation of Moses is that he was kind of, not that he would be directly involved, because John Martin, I guess, would be directly involved. But
you know what the magic to this is?
Let's hear it.
The great credit. I thank you, Joel Goldberg. Joel played point. I've always been somewhat wary of authority, and I was so blessed to have Joel Goldberg there to take the word from Moses. This is sounding
It's like
biblical, isn't
yeah, on the Mount Sinai.
it? Well, I've never been to that hospital, actually. So Joel would come down with the tablets, and he would say, this is what Moses wants us to do. And it was wonderful. I loved that relationship because I'm sure Moses is wonderful, and he's got an outstanding reputation professionally for what he's
As a
accomplished in
visionary?
Canadian television. People call him a visionary. And, I don't know. I'll just take it for granted that he is. I've seen the evidence of his work, let's put it that way, without actually meeting the man. And
Bit of a mind blow there, right, Brad? I think people would assume you had met Moses more than the
Nope.
one time professionally.
Thank you, Joel.
So Joel, okay, so today in 2023, as we speak, Joel Goldberg still works with Moses.
Yes.
At the Zoomerplex there.
Yes, not an easy task when you think of it. Moses is, as well as being a visionary, he's very particular. And,
Maybe he's mellowed in old age.
I doubt it.
He's in his 80s now.
Yeah. But I don't think so. That fire still
You've heard
burns
stories.
bright. And I would have to say that it takes a special skills that Joel Goldberg has
Okay.
to handle that hot flame for 40 years.
Good on Joel. But
Yeah.
if I may, Joel has been, and even Joel believes that Moses should come on Toronto Mike. This is a Joel. I've had these private conversations, not so private right now, because I'm telling you on the record here. But Joel Goldberg has told me to my face, Moses should come on Toronto Mike. Joel has been unable to convince Moses that he should come on Toronto Mike. Do you think Moses Znaimer should make his Toronto Mike debut so we can, collect all this data and information about this visionary?
I think only Moses can answer for Moses.
Well, let's call him up and see. Okay. So, John Martin, I want to shed some light on this guy because he's a guy, we talk about him often, but not always glowingly. Like I can tell you, Ziggy Lawrence came over, and I think Joel drove Ziggy here, actually, was Ziggy's chauffeur for this episode. But Ziggy's been over a couple of times, but
Ziggy's wonderful.
does not speak warmly of John Martin.
I don't know John Martin. It's funny. This goes back to what I said. You're doing what you do, and you kind of wish afterwards that you'd spend a little bit more time getting to know these people that you are working with. The people that I mentioned, and John Martin included, and many others within that building that their faces in the hallway, you wave at them and think it's going to go on forever, but maybe next week I'll actually sit down and have a beer with this person. But more often than not, it was John Roberts and me and Gene Bushy and a few of the others spending misspent evenings, especially at the old building at the Windsor House, around the corner playing darts and drinking beer. And that was kind of our circle.
How's your beer today, your Great Lakes beer?
Have I told you how tasty and full-bodied this Great Lakes Brewery beer is? This is the premium lager that we're drinking today with a 5% alcohol by content and 47 milliliters of just handcrafted goodness.
This is why you're a voiceover professional. And I'm going to tell the guys at Great Lakes who to hire when they finally do their radio campaign. Brad Giffen. Oh no, sorry, you can't hire Brad Giffen for that.
Yeah, Brad Giffen's on a beach someplace. He
Why
just
the name
left and
change?
retired.
Why this Avenue is obviously named out. It's a fake name like street or road, Avenue, right?
Yes, you are correct.
You feel smart. Did you know you were in the presence of genius here when you came on Toronto Mike?
First Moses, now Mike. Oh
Two
my
visionaries.
gosh.
One's richer than the other.
What happened was, in about 2013, I had been looking for an alternative for news for some time. And 2013, 2014, there were some changes at Bell Media. And I thought...
That sentence is evergreen, by the way. Like for always. There's changes, cost cutting, and crazy
layoffs.
shit going down at Bell Media.
And they laid off my good friend Dan Matheson, and I thought, this is going to be serious. Because I knew that my ass was just as almost up as high as Dan's on that flagpole. 2 years before, though, I had taken the precaution to cast around in my mind, what would I like to do? And I thought back. Some of my happiest days were at CHUM-FM and doing commercial work with Jeff Shire, who was the commercial producer, Zeke Stebiak and Jeff Shire. But it was particularly Jeff Shire that I was working with. He introduced me to the CHUM-FM studio, production studio, and those were my first chops, where I learned them. And so moving forward a little bit, by 2013, a lot, 30 years. I'm casting around thinking,
it's okay. We'll come back. It's like a Tarantino movie. We're jumping around.
Yeah. I thought, what would I like to do aside from news? And it settled on me that I would like to do voiceovers. So I started taking acting classes. I took business classes. And this is a long way to answer, why did you go from Giffen to Avenyou? Mm-hmm. So by 2015, I was actually working as Brad Avenyou under the radar for a couple of reasons. I didn't want potential casting agents to think of me as a guy who could do only news reads. And even though CTV News Channel was very relaxed, not as relaxed as Toronto Rocks, obviously it's the news, but there was a news read. And I didn't want casting directors to think, okay, this is the only sound that he can do. And so I thought that, and also to avoid any conflict of interest or perception of conflict of interest, because Brad Giffen can't be talking to the CEO of some meat packaging company about some outbreak of, salmonella, and the next day doing his commercials, right?
Right.
So I thought, what name can I choose in amongst all the other decisions you have to make when you are creating a business and opening up accounts and, coaching and everything else? Make it easy. Well, I live on Avenyou Road. And I thought, I'll just make it Avenyou, Avenyou. And that was the easy. And on to the next pressing question that I had to answer, of course, in those early days of setting up my company, Avenyou Voice Services.
Listen, much like George Costanza said, you got to keep those worlds from colliding, okay? So, yeah, you're right. You're reading the news. You can't be doing it. You're right. You can't be doing a news story.
Well, there was
Meanwhile, your voice is like the voice of the campaign on it. So, two Brads.
Yeah.
Smart.
There was overlap, obviously, because I didn't leave news until 2018.
Right. Didn't
leave CTV News Channel until 2018.
Well, maybe now, so let's walk through it. But before we leave Toronto Rocks, John, because, I told you 2 hours on Toronto Rocks. Okay, 2 hours. This is the deal. 2 hours on Toronto Rocks, 5 minutes on CHUM-FM, 5 minutes on CTV News Channel. Just kidding, of course. John Riddell wrote in and said, so he's thinking about you, Brad Giffen, on Toronto Rocks, which I'm sure you've heard from many a Gen Xer, what a big deal that was for us, that we could go home and hear Helix is Rock You.
It was a big deal back then, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was the whole idea of the, we were already listening to the music on the radio, but suddenly that we could watch the videos, be it a Bryan Adams video. I always point out Helix is Rock You because I feel like I saw it a lot on Toronto Rocks. Like there was a lot of that hair metal, but this was a big deal. And again, for us
80s.
less rich people who didn't get much music in 1984, we had to wait for it to come to some. Same with TSN, by the way. TSN would get Blue Jay games, and I used to want to see every game. You'd have to know somebody with a TSN. It's like, oh, we got to go to this house because this person actually can get that Blue Jay game or whatever. But it took a little while for us less wealthy people to get there. Okay, so I digress. But John Riddell says, did that video lever on the panel actually push the video, or was it a useless prop? Do you know the video lever that John is speaking of? So give us the lowdown on that video lever.
There were 3 aspects of this studio, as I remember. The shot box, as we used to call it. This is in the old building, 99 Queen Street
99 Queen East.
And there was, first of all, what's known as the psych, because the Toronto Rock studio was no larger than the studio that we're sitting in right now.
Right.
It's about the same size.
Right.
Long and... but the width that we have, which is about 10 feet long, and then it would go deep, about 15 feet. That's where the camera and the cameraman would be parked. But you could literally stand in the middle of this space and touch both walls.
Wow.
In this rectangular space that ended with the set and the psych and me behind that desk. So... that was to make it look larger, that psych. If you look back on it, sort of a pink thing that kind of graduates in.
Right.
The levers, that's an actual old mixing board, and the lever was part of that. And me reaching up to place the video, I would have been doing it with my left hand, into that slot. Well, there was a video. There was a big old, one of the old, 2-inch videos there. And I'd push that in, but as I reached up, that would be the cue for the director to hit the video because there was a little bit of lag time. Right. So that's coming up on Toronto Rocks. So in that time, the video would hit.
So it is a useless prop because it's not really firing off any video. It's just the signal for the video to be fired off by somebody else.
Well, that's an important thing when you think of it.
Yeah.
We're
here for the details here.
I know what you mean. No, it did not serve a mechanical function other than signaling.
Right. Like when Rogers got the NHL deal, they spent all this money on the studio, and it was so, to me, it was so pretentious and like gross. And dare I say it was very American, but like they'd have all these like phony baloney, I don't know, ice things they'd hit and things would happen. And it was all such useless nonsense. But anyway, your hair. John Riddell wants me to talk to you about your hair then and now. 10 out of 10, he says. Your hair was 10 out of 10. I will point out you still have your hair.
Yeah.
Which is half the battle in itself.
As a matter of fact, I grow crops of hair for hair-impaired people now. Oh. No, I don't. Let me go back to something.
I bid on that, eh? So this is how
let me go back to that lever question. I'm
okay. Spend an hour on the lever question. Absolutely.
It goes back to something that I learned from my very first station, a fellow named Ernie Courtney, an old fellow, back in 1976.
Okay.
And this is Lindsay now. And Ernie Courtney, he was probably the ancient age of 60, which is ancient to a 19-year-old.
Right.
Ernie was this wonderful gnome-like man who had been in the business forever, and this was probably his last before he left the business at CKLY. And he said, and he'd wave his fingers like this. He'd wave his fingers. And he'd say, Brad, there's 3 things you got to remember. Don't tell me anything. Don't gossip. It's all done with smoke and mirrors. Be conscientious about what you do, but don't take yourself or your job too seriously.
Right.
And that's where the lever comes in.
Right.
And he said, number 3, this chair in front of the mic is not yours. It belongs to the company. You serve the pleasure of those who hired you.
Right.
And those 3 pieces of advice have served me so well throughout all these years. And I think
Well done.
when you violate those 3 rules, you do so at your own peril.
Smart advice for anybody in the business today. Now, okay, so I want to get you to CHUM-FM, but did you ever meet Terry David Mulligan when you're filling in for him, or is it all...
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Was I a personal friend? No.
I find him to be a rather, much like yourself, like a fascinating figure in the Canadian media zeitgeist. Like,
I'm not fascinating. I'm as boring
okay,
as paint
well, you're
drying.
boring only compared to Terry David Mulligan.
Oh,
I can tell
stop
you.
that.
I can tell you, TDM.
I don't know Terry.
I had an exchange with Terry, who's an FOTM, and it was about the 299 Queen Street West dock, and he was sort of going off on how it's typical Toronto bullshit, like ignoring that the rest of the country exists, because there's zero mention of much West, and anyway, he's not in that. But it's interesting that you did fill in for him. That was Good Rockin' Tonight, of course, and I also find...
83?
Yeah, around 83. And, I've never seen Rock Wars on CBC, although I do now want to see Rock Wars on CBC. But
I think there are a couple of YouTube clips of
I got to find this thing. I was a bit young for it, I think. I was busy watching Fraggle Rock or something. But Samantha Taylor, key figure, a future FOTM, because I absolutely have to get her on the program because we keep covering, I just had, Jonathan Gross talking video singles, which John Major was on. He leaves that gig, I believe, for Toronto Rocks, and that's how Jonathan Gross gets it.
You're excavating ancient
It's just
history
happening,
here.
man. But Samantha Taylor, you filled in for her. These are the OGs of the Canadian video
OG?
show. Original Gangster, I suppose, is what it stands for. Shout out to Ice-T, who my wife met in Vegas, okay? We do a
you're
contest in our family.
You are such a shameless name dropper, Michael.
Well, I didn't meet him. But we do this game in the family, like, what's the most famous person you ever met? And my daughter, Michelle, always wins this contest because she met Will Smith. But Monica's contribution is meeting Ice-T, which is also a very big deal. And I'm like, I met Brad Giffen, and I always end up losing the contest. But what was Samantha Taylor like? Like she's a like I said, OG.
The foggiest notion, except she seemed very
lovely.
nice.
Okay.
Well, a few times that I ran into her, she was wonderful.
Okay.
And but I don't know her personally. I had never.
She won't take your text here.
I would never claim to know her personally.
Okay. So let's get you...
Terry David Mulligan. I'm sure he's a wonderful man too.
I'm phoning him tonight.
I don't know either one of them.
I'm going to get 90 minutes of Terry David Mulligan on all things Brad Giffen tonight.
You know what's going to happen? You're going to ask me all these names that you want to drop, and I'm going to go, hey, man, I don't know.
Hey, you were part of the scene. These names are all tied to the scene, right? So you're in this scene.
The world moves on. And the sun comes up, the sun sets. Do that every day for 30 years. You got to let it go.
You got to let it go until you come on Toronto Mike. Then it's like, let's talk about this because you know the deal coming over here. Okay, so on that note, because now I want to ask you about CHUM-FM, but you've got your fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery. You're going to bring some home with you. I also have in my freezer for you,
Is
Brad.
there a Palma pasta waiting?
Palma pasta lasagna. Can you believe it? In my freezer.
Pasta. Wonderful. Thank you, Mike.
Take that home. You'll love it. You'll love it. Thank you, Palma Pasta. And Palma Pasta is hosting us FOTMs. Brad, you're invited to this. It's on December 9th at noon at Palma's Kitchen. We're going to record a Pandemic Friday reunion. That means Stu Stone and Cam Gordon. And people like yourself who show up will pop on the fourth mic and say hello and happy holidays and all that jazz. And we're going to eat Palma Pasta and we're going to drink Great Lakes beer. I have a couple other gifts for you. I have measuring tape for you, Brad Giffen. This is courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's an interesting
takeaway.
That's an interesting piece of swag. So why would they? Is this?
Well, what do you think? There's no answer to this.
Is this to measure the corpse?
That's the go-to joke, but I feel like it makes your life
Sorry,
easier.
I went to a go-to joke.
Brad, leave the comedy for the experts. Okay?
Yes, that's right. Ooh, don't try this at home.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Enjoy that. It'll make your life easier.
Thank you very much.
And I have a Bluetooth speaker for you, Brad.
Funeral Home.
Thank you, Ridley Funeral Home. And another Brad, the chief bottle washer over there, the funeral director, is a gentleman named Brad Jones. Brad on Brad. You're Brad. He's Brad.
Right.
There's got to be a club.
There was a Brad Jones at CHUM.
I knew this. Yes. Is he a good guy? Is he with us still?
I don't know.
I should know these things. You don't know this.
I don't know. Okay. I don't know anybody.
Google it. Brad
I'm
Jones.
a terrible nameless name dropper.
As long as you can talk to me about Joel Goldberg, I'm happy. Okay, this is a wireless speaker for you, courtesy of Moneris and Brad, in addition to listening to... do you like the band Moby Grape?
I had a glass of it earlier this morning. It's fantastic. I start every day with Moby Grape. You know, when you are stressed, you lose vitamin B. Only Moby Grape can recharge your spirit and get you going right back. What is Moby Grape?
What if I told you? So Moby Grape was a part of that California scene that gave us the Mamas and the Papas, Crosby, Stills and Nash,
That Moby
Buffalo
Grape,
Springfield.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the drummer for Moby Grape is a guy named Don Stevenson, who's lived in Toronto the past 10 years.
Is that
And
right?
You can see him busking at Toronto at TTC stations. Yeah, like I literally, the guy dropped by today.
Isn't that like,
We covered his history with Moby Grape and everything, and that episode drops tomorrow. But just curious if you had heard of the band, because Moby Grape is a band that like students of the scene can talk to you about Moby Grape, but normies like us.
how is it though that he's not still performing in a professional setting?
Well, he will be at Massey Hall next month for a Last Waltz tribute, like a
I
tribute to
see.
Last
Okay.
Waltz. And he's,
Yeah.
but he, at the age of 82, this guy,
Oh,
Don Stevenson, is making his Massey Hall debut. Isn't that wild?
Wonderful. Yeah.
So it's not too late for you, Brad. You can make your Massey Hall debut. Okay.
I have to learn to play an instrument first.
We can sing with those pipes. So this is a Bluetooth wireless speaker
Thank
for you, Brad.
so much.
But you know what you got to do with that?
This is a Boxan?
Boxan. You need to listen to season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, which is a Moneris podcast hosted by FOTML Grego, who went east. He went to the Maritimes, Newfoundland, and he's been talking to small business owners and collecting their inspiring stories so we can be inspired. So season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, now available.
And I'll be able to listen to it on my Boxan.
Boxan. Oh, we heard some police songs on Toronto Rocks, didn't we?
Yeah, one or two.
One or two, absolutely.
Yeah.
And last, but I'm going to come back to a couple more later, but I do want to tell people to subscribe and listen to The Advantaged Investor, which is a podcast from Raymond James Canada. Whether you already work with a trusted financial advisor or currently manage your own investment plans, The Advantaged Investor provides the engaging wealth management information you value as you pursue your most important goals. Brad Giffen, please, I know that this wasn't a big part of your fascinating career, but you did pop on CHUM-FM after Toronto Rocks. Like, how did that come to be, and how was that experience?
Oh, my friend, that was a big part of my career. Yeah.
It was an important part, but not a lengthy stretch, right?
Well, you'll notice if I went through my resume with you here,
Let's do it. Let's go to your LinkedIn
you would
account.
notice that there's a 3-year commonality to each one of these positions that I've been. And CHUM-FM was was the peak in my career, I've often said. And I know that sounds funny to be referring to something that was the last half of the 80s. But everything from there was gravy. CHUM-FM was my personal peak. It was where every dream I'd ever had was fulfilled. And not only was I on the radio, I met all my heroes, among them John Major, who I'd met in 77. Of course, I knew him, but Mike Holland and Darryl B. and Terry Steele and Scott Carpenter and John Donaby and David Marsden, Roger Ashby, producer Tom Jokic, who was Roger
Also an
Ashby's
FOTM.
producer. Is he? Yeah. Jeff Shire, of course, who I mentioned earlier, and of course, program director Ross Davies at CHUM-FM. Wow. I mean, these were all just legendary people to me, and CHUM-FM, everything after CHUM-FM, everything after 1990 was gravy.
Wow.
But CHUM-FM was, for me, the defining part of my career.
Is that because you grew up listening to 1050 Chum?
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it, right? That was the pinnacle in this country.
And CHUM-FM, when, FM started to become the thing. So I was listening to them both.
So Pete and Geets.
Yep.
And David Marsden, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. What's in the brown paper bag? The Mars bar.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. He's been suffering from COVID lately. I hope he's doing better now. But he had a tough run with COVID. I want to shout out a good FOTM, Brian Master, as well. He was also a sweetheart, and he showed up at TMLX 13. So hopefully he's at TMLX 14. Yeah, but he's a sweetheart. So this CHUM-FM is a dream come true.
Yes, very much so. It was the most stunning 3 years of my career. It was everything. And then after that was news.
So everything post CHUM-FM is news in your professional life, other than the voiceover work.
Yeah, exactly. So, after CHUM-FM, I was with Fox in Salt Lake City, thanks to John Roberts, who suggested that I get in contact with his agent of the William Morris Agency. And I did. And
well, we're skipping a little bit here, only because you did do a little work at CFTO.
CFTO, oh yes, I did, didn't I?
I'm here on your IMDb page. I mean, your LinkedIn page.
No, you're exactly right. 1990, I went to CFTO, as CTV Toronto was known. I was a general assignment reporter. I was there during the time of Austin Delaney and
who
Tom
just retired.
Hayes, Gail Smith. Tom Gibney was the anchor.
What was Gail Smith like? I get more questions. I feel like I need to track her down. I get more, and I won't name the questions I get because you can imagine the urban legends or I don't know if they're urban legends or not, but they were all over the schoolyard. But what was she like, Gail Smith?
I have no idea.
Do you remember any of the? You only remember the icons, John Major. You remember David Marsden. But okay,
I remember Gail as being a hard worker.
Okay.
I remember Tom Gibney as being a hard worker, but I didn't know them outside of work.
Okay, we just lost Tom a couple of years back, I guess. We lost Tom, but Gail's out there. Gail, reach out to me, mike@torontomike.com. Let's talk. I need to talk to you. So CFTO is your last, then you go to, as you said, Salt Lake City. Yeah. Fox News, that's 1994, you go there. How long are you in Salt Lake City?
93. And I was there until 96. 96, I went to ABC News New Orleans, ABC 26.
Aren't you supposed to say New Orleans?
A few ways to say it. New Orleans is one of them. But New Orleans, even to this day, it kind of grates on me when somebody mispronounces and calls it New Orleans. And there are so many examples in song, however, that riding on the city of New Orleans,
Willie Nelson. And then
well, that's not Willie Nelson.
Oh, that's not Willie Nelson? Who is that?
I don't know.
I think he did a cover that I know. I think I know the Willie Nelson version better.
On the road again. And anyway.
do more
show
Willie.
Really is a show of digressions, isn't it?
I want to
then
hear
from there,
more
I went to
Willie.
ABC 7 in Sarasota, which was part of the top 10 Tampa market. Okay. And then in 2008, as a result of the cataclysmic economic collapse,
right,
our station had to start doing layoffs, and I was in the second wave. I had been the employee of the year just the year before.
Really?
And then,
but that was a terrible. That was a big year. That was the
all media.
Yeah.
Is dependent. All media are dependent on the local market in which they are situated. So think of the commercials that are on radio or television or in the newspaper. Oh, right. Remember those? And if the furniture is not being sold to people, then the furniture stores stop advertising.
Right.
And if they stop advertising, and the car dealerships and everything else that's associated with the advertising on various forms of media, then those stations, those media platforms have to start contracting, and I was part of that contraction.
So on the bright side, I mean, this economic downturn does bring you back home.
2008. And it actually was a blessing in disguise. And, I became much closer with my family who had moved up back to Toronto. And so my son and I came back in 2008. And my sister Brenda and her husband all became closer. My daughter Ajala and her husband Shane, 3 grandkids now.
Nice.
So that was 2008. Yeah, and I had expected to be back just for a summer gig. And because just while I was trying to get my feet again in 2008, I thought, who can I phone? So I phoned the CBC, a friend of mine worked there, and phoned CTV. Another friend of mine had worked there, Paul Rogers, fellow reporter, excellent reporter, probably the best reporter in my cohort of that year of 1990 to 93. Paul was a star. So it was no surprise when I learned subsequent to that he had been named the vice president of news. So I phoned up Paul, and he says, it's funny you phoned. I'm just looking for somebody who can fill in for the summertime. One of the reporters either off on maternity leave, and I think it was Naomi Parnas. And
Who I saw the other day at Dana Levinson's event.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, they're both doing great.
Both wonderful people, too. That, I do know them a little bit better.
Okay, let's spend the next hour on Dana.
Oh, yeah, that's a loaded statement. Anyway, yeah, Dana's, I've got a quick story about Dana.
Tell me, because I do, so I produce her podcast today on the DL with Dana Levinson. Yeah.
Oh, she's wonderful. So at one point when I first began at 2008 at CTV, I was filling in on what I thought was going to be a summer job on CTV Toronto, and somehow I got invited to, in a different unit, Canada AM, to do their morning break-ins. So those are the quick little news breaks at the top and bottom of the hour.
Right.
So I'm doing News Channel. No, I'm doing CTV Toronto. Pardon me. I'm getting a little bit confused here.
That's Bell Media's fault, by the way.
No,
Or is it Great Lakes' fault?
I'm thinking it's Great Lakes Brewery. Did I tell you Great Lakes Lager?
Doesn't it add, though, like,
5%.
the convo's better with Great Lakes, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said yes when I said, would you share a beer with me? So
Yeah, well, who could say no?
You'd be surprised.
So I was doing CTV Toronto. I was doing Canada AM, and I was doing CTV News Channel. I literally had a daytimer when daytimers were a thing that had days that were highlighted with different colors according to the unit that I was working. Which brings me to my Dana Levinson story. It's not a big payoff, but it's kind of sad. So I'm doing the late night after having worked News Channel earlier that morning. Now I'm doing the 11 o'clock news. Mm-hmm. And it comes time for me to introduce Dana Levinson. I introduced her as Dana Delaney.
Oh, like Austin Delaney.
Yeah, like Austin Delaney or Dana Delaney, the movie actor.
I forgot about her. Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I tried to, backpedal.
Tap dancing.
And Dana was so gracious about it. And then, of course, days later, I was just mortified.
Right.
Days later, she walked through the CTV newsroom, CTV News Channel newsroom, and where I was. And I said, again, Dana, I'm so sorry. She says, not a problem. She couldn't have been more gracious. But I have worked with people who would have been highly offended and would have let you know it in that moment on the air.
That's the list I want. Okay, Brad? Who are those people?
No, you wouldn't know them.
Can I give you a fun fact about Dana? And she's great, again, on the DL. We just did a live event. It's funny, I was at this live event and it was all about menopause, which obviously will not affect me directly.
Oh, you could get menopause.
Menopause. I'm like, who put the men in menopause? And honestly, I learned so much and I found it fascinating, even though, it won't affect me directly, though at some point it will probably affect my wife, so whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it was a great live event and it's now shared in the On the DL feed. But a fun fact about Dana is her dad was one of the fastest people in the world. The man ran 100 meters. He's no longer with us, sadly, but he was one of the fastest people in the world and went to the Olympics.
How impressive.
So her father, Dana Levinson's dad, was a world-class sprinter.
Huh.
There's your fun fact.
Yeah,
and Naomi, I want to shout her out because she just launched a new
yes, she did.
Consulting practice or whatever. And I did
communications.
Yeah, I worked with her on a project called Mind Over Matter, a women's brain health initiative, and it was great working with Naomi.
Yeah,
so
go ahead and give her site the
shout out to Naomi.
Shout out.
Yeah, always Naomi Parnas, who I think she crashed the show. I had Mark Saltzman over who talks about tech, and I think Naomi and I were doing something else, and she crashed that party. But she has yet to come over for her debut. So Naomi, let's make that happen, okay? All right. So as you said, is this where you meet Dan Matheson?
I think it's The Narrative. Is the name of her new company.
Okay. Shout out to The Narrative. Is Dan...
Saw it on LinkedIn this morning.
Yeah, so did I. Look at us, all connected here. Okay. Shout out to Elvis, the LinkedIn man. Dan Matheson, this is where you meet him because you're popping on
I got
Canada
a funny
AM.
story for you.
Yeah, I love this guy.
So I do too. And Dan and I are, I got to tell you, Dan is one of the best raconteurs, bon vivant, sophisticated. He cooks like a world-class chef. And he's as you know, you've spoken with him. You sat in this very chair.
He came over.
He's a terrific guy.
Yeah.
And he and I have become friends.
Good.
throughout the years, but I didn't know him before CTV News Channel. But let me take you back to a story. So it was 1976. My very first station manager, whose name I won't say out of respect for his family, but this gentleman who hired me at CKLY in 1976, I was completely green, and he said to me, "Boy," and that's how he'd address everybody, and he had this red face, and it would sweat, and he'd always shout when he'd speak, and he'd get those little bits of foam in the corner of his mouth, hair sheared, and he'd have these sports jackets that looked like they could double as a picnic tablecloth. All right, so he's up on this raised desk in the back of this old house on Kent Street in Lindsay, and I'm sitting in front of him about to get this job. He says, "Boy, I got to teach you how to be a radio announcer, but I want you to make a commitment to be here for 2 years. Now, for instance, when you introduce Frank Sinatra, you don't call him Frank Sinatra, you call him Old Blue Eyes." I said, "Okay, thank you, Mr. Blank." And he says, "Listen, though, I'm gonna teach you, and I want you to make a commitment. You're gonna be here for at least 2 years." "Well, you're 19 years old, but you want the job."
Right.
"Yes, sir. Because I don't want you taking off like," and the name meant nothing to me.
Right.
So years later, I meet Dan Matheson when I go to CTV News Channel. Wonderful guy. We get talking and find out he's been to CKLY too. He spent time there as well. He was there just the year before I got there in 76. He was there in 1975.
Okay.
And the penny finally dropped.
Right.
The boss had said, when I told him I was leaving the next year, he was so mad. The station manager, station owner. I was going to Peterborough. "Jesus Christ, boy! You made a commitment! You're no better than Dan Matheson!" And it came to me.
Right.
He was speaking of Dan. I've told that story to Dan. We've laughed about that. I said, "Considering how far you've come, Dan, I would say I'm in awfully good company."
So a couple of things. Your impression of this unnamed individual reminds me. I watched a show called King of the Hill, and Hank Hill's dad, Cotton. That's how he sounds.
Oh,
it's like, so you could, if you need a replacement for Cotton.
How interesting.
Yeah, there you go. And
said no one.
And this just speaks to what a small world the Canadian media like. It's yes, I think it was yesterday. I was watching a little bit of, and we're going to get to your time at CTV News Channel, but I'm catching a bit of it. And I could see, I don't know, Justin Trudeau was saying...
No, go ahead with what you got. Because,
but I see Marcy Ian
I think
there.
I've expended my best stories now. The rest is just news stuff.
Well, the rest is going to be all about Moby Grape, okay? No. So Marcy Ian is in the frame, okay? And I was like, I'm looking at her, I'm like, am I looking at the next Prime Minister of Canada? But Marcy Ian, who's also an FOTM, like you and Dan Matheson, comes out of Canada AM. What are your thoughts? I know you haven't worked... on Canada AM in many years, but what are your thoughts on the whole cancellation of Canada AM and the replacement with Your Morning? Any thoughts on that at all?
None. No.
Zero, no thoughts, negative.
No.
Is this because you're hesitant to speak, poorly about anything? I know that Dan Matheson had things to say about it.
No, and I'll tell you this. It goes back to Ernie Courtney rule number 3. Hey. The chair in front of this mic is not yours. It belongs to the company.
Right.
It's not yours to decide. It's not even yours to comment on.
Right.
Yeah. So I know.
So Bell Media can do what it wants with their morning show, and if they want to cancel Canada AM, and then like a phoenix rising from the ashes is Your Morning. Shout out to future FOTM Ben Mulrooney. That's their prerogative, right? I don't know why Bell Media even owns these media companies. Like, I feel like just sell cables.
Present, future, and past. Oh my God!
Like
has anyone fallen out of favor as an FOTM?
Oh yeah.
Have you ever had to fire an FOTM?
Firstly, once you're an FOTM, you're always an FOTM, but that F is
kind
a
of
little...
like being a colonel or a general or even a president.
I will say there are absolutely some people who have appeared on the program and then have become like frenemies. Like they turncoats. Like they turned on me for no particular good reason. Yeah, a couple of names.
I don't want to have to even explore that. That could get so ugly.
Very few. I will point out there are hundreds of them, and very, very few would turn on Toronto Mike, who only roots for talent like yourself here. Why does it end for Brad Giffen?
What's ended?
Well, your run at CTV News Channel ends because people were tweeting at me in 2018 to say, where's Brad? And I had no answer at the time. I didn't even reply. Like, I don't know where Brad is. What happened to you in Bell Media?
I just got to the point where, I'll be honest with you, it was the chaos and the sadness. It was a cumulative effect over the years. And then there was the Trump business, and every item turned into a Trump tweet that we were reporting every time he burped.
Right.
And I thought, man, I am so tired of having this vile man's vile words come out of my mouth. And I had that discussion with management, and I said, we've got to use some form of news judgment here. And what probably more than anything it peaked, it was, Trump going off on LeBron James. The news story was about LeBron James opening a school,
right,
and promising that he would pay for the college tuition of anyone who graduated a school. Wonderful, wonderful gesture. That's a leader.
Right.
And tacked on to this wonderful story about LeBron James was this response from that sniveling Donald Trump, slagging LeBron James and one of the anchors on CNN. And I'm reading this, and it's coming up in the prompter. Now, it's coming up cold, of course. And I thought, no more. And so that's the long and the short of it. And I was able to move on because I had ramped up from 2013. And by that point, my voiceover career was almost equal with my TV pay. So I was just able to transition smoothly.
Build the side hustle while you got the primary gig, and then you can switch over at some point, like many of us have. Smart.
And that seemed like an opportune time with the president still in power for another 2 years after that.
So did you essentially retire from MSN to mainstream media to focus on your Brad Avenyou voice talent career?
Did I? What?
Like you essentially retired.
My MSN?
And mainstream media.
Oh, my MSM?
Yeah, MSM, mainstream media. I talk short and everything these days.
Oh, man. What's an OG? Remind me again, I forgot that one.
Original Gangster. Have you not heard Original Gangster by Ice-T? You've never heard this album?
What's an Ice-T?
What are your jams,
I'm going to have
Brad?
one of those when I go home.
I know Moby Grape's not on the list, but what are your jams? Like if you were listening to music in your private time, what are you listening to? Helix? Like what are you listening to? Anvil?
I don't mean to laugh, because Helix was a great band, but it's not the first one that would probably come to mind.
But what do you listen to? I need to know. I need to know. What are you like a Sade guy? Are you
a Sade guy? Another 80s, right? Or 90s?
Oh yeah, I gotta modernize this. Are you listening to Arcade Fire? Was it White Stripes? What's going on? Brad, what's going on over there?
Have you heard the latest Rolling Stones album?
Yeah, and the new Lady Gaga backed up single is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good.
I think it's great. I'm just still going through it. I'm a big fan of Spotify, so
okay.
I've got everything from Puccini to Prince on here. But
you went back there
Kim
too.
Mitchell.
Okay.
When you're talking about Canadian artists.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So would you go back to Max Webster, or do you start with solo Kim?
Yeah, all the way back to Max Webster.
Okay, now I'm interested.
Yeah, for sure. Do I know anything about Kim Mitchell or Max
I won't quiz
Webster?
you on him, but if you like the music.
I know nothing.
That's fine. Did you know he's an FOTM?
Isn't everybody?
No, unfortunately not. I'm still working on Tom Cochran. But okay.
Like Don Henley, Sting, it could be anything.
It's funny, you criticized me for going back to the 80s, and all these artists are 70s and 80s artists.
Yeah, that's true enough. And my son has, I think my daughter does too. She's a big Steely Dan fan. But my son loves progressive rock. And, what's your theory about that?
Liking prog rock? What do you mean?
No, I'm talking generally about, I should explain, my son and daughter are in their early 30s. They, like many others of that similar age, liked the music that I liked. What do you think that is?
I don't know. Did you play a lot of it when they were growing up?
That's possible. Is it possible that a lot of the music that's out these days is less than excellent?
Okay, I often think that, and then think if I say that out loud, I'm going to be like Abraham Simpson. Like
don't you miss bands that have backup singers, for instance?
Yeah. Well, what I miss is I miss
music,
bands.
Don't you miss music that wasn't mixed in somebody's bedroom?
Yes, I do. And that's why when I go to a concert, typically it's for an actual band. Like there's an actual live drummer, there's a guy on bass guitar, there's a guy lead guitar, there's a singer, sometimes there's a keyboardist. Shout out to Rob Pruce, who's visiting on Friday. But I'm sorry, who? Rob Pruce is the keyboardist for the Spoons.
Oh, I know that. But more importantly, he is what?
He's an FOTM. But I will say this, there's a lot of footage out there of Gord Depp and Rob Pruce on Toronto Rocks, but I think all that footage is John Major. I don't know if there's enough Brad Giffen Spoons content out there.
I don't think I ever had the pleasure to interview anyone from Spoons.
Who's your favorite interview in the Toronto Rocks days?
I couldn't tell you.
Not even one artist that you interviewed on Toronto Rocks.
None of them.
I can't believe I got to talk to X.
None of them stand out whatsoever, and I'll tell you why.
Wow.
Everybody's on their best behavior. They're there for 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
They stand, deliver.
You don't get 90 minutes with these guys?
No. And that's another thing about fame, or at least the fame that I experienced, on whatever level that may be measured. I was famous only because I was sitting next to somebody who was famous. It was fame by association. And,
but someone had to do it.
Yeah, that sounds like one of Ernie Courtney's rules there. I believe that was rule number 1. It's all done with mirrors. Never believe your own press.
Fred Patterson from Humble and Fred tells me, he often talks about, he goes, you're only as good as your call letters, he tells me. Oh. Which, in the suggestion there is that you could put some pedestrian bozo on a big, I don't know, CFNY or CHUM-FM or some big thing. And it's like, okay, it's the actual star of the show is these call letters. And then you're you lift it up by association somehow.
What's he referring to? You're only as good personally, or you're only as good professionally? Because I think as your call letters.
Okay, I think this is what he means when I drill him on it. But let's say I'm going to take a guy like a real life person, Bob McCowan. Okay, so Bob McCowan had a successful afternoon drive sports talk show on the Fan 590. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you took Bob McCowan and you lifted him out of the Fan 590 and you dropped him on another station, I'm just making this up. Let's say you put him on Saga, like some kind of station, and now he's got the exact same show at the exact same time on this other station. Did the Bob McCowan fans abandon the Fan 590 and move to this other station to hear Bob McCowan, or did they stick with the brand of station that they're loyal to, the Fan 590, and just listen to, I don't know, the replacement, Jeff Blair and Stephen Brunt or whoever the heck is on at that point? That's the great discussion. We don't know the answer to that question because Bob never did leave the Fan. He got fired and then he started a podcast. But Fred is of the opinion that, no, you're only as good as your call letters. You can't just lift a Brad Giffen here from CHUM-FM and drop him on, I don't know, Mix 99.9 and have the same results. Yeah,
I think there's something to that. So you're talking about professional. You're only as good professionally as your call letters. Because there are implications for people who might say, I'm only as good personally. As a person, my worth is tied up in my call letters.
Oh, yeah.
If you lose those call letters,
right,
some people lose themselves.
You know who I'm thinking of right now? I'm thinking of a man who literally had the station's call letters tattooed on his ass.
Was it a man?
It was a man named Martin Streak.
Where laughter was king.
Do you do any movie trailer voiceovers?
No.
So I won't go to a Cineplex and hear some Brad Giffen.
I feel like they kind of don't do those things.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't been to a theater. I got to say, since COVID, I haven't been to a theater very often.
No, but movie trailers don't usually involve in a world where laughter was king. One man, a girl, two girls.
men at all.
They don't do that anymore. They let you look at movie theaters or movie trailers, and you see them. Well, you see them on social media. You see them on YouTube.
Right.
They don't require most times. They don't.
Okay, so to put a bow on the Martin Streak story is that the man worked 25 plus. I don't know. He's so identified with the station. He tattooed the station's logo on his ass. Long story short is Chorus ended up owning the station, and Chorus parted way with him in 2009. Yeah. 2 months later, this gentleman took his own life. And I'm not here to connect any dots. I don't no idea. I can't even speak to his mindset and everything. But the man, regardless of whether that anything to do, I would never say, Chorus is responsible for the death of Martin Streak. I would never even suggest such a thing. But there is a danger in identifying too closely to your call letters when that is owned by some conglomerate and you have no control over your employment there.
It's dangerous. You cannot tie your sense of self-worth with call letters or company name or whatever else any of us.
But you could do that for Brad Avenyou here because that is you. No. Like at least now you are an independent.
I'll never fire myself.
Right. Well, I got the same deal going on here. Okay. So it took you like 40 plus years to find your calling. That's where you're at today. You found your calling.
Yeah. I do believe I'm doing exactly what I want to do now. I love every day. I work with companies and producers all over the world. As a matter of fact, before I came here today, I'm working with a producer in London on a project that originated in Slovenia. And I've got one more waiting for me too. That's from Kyiv of all places. It's a space project that I do weekly for this company's space channel, it's called. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, good on you, because I know you have a few key clients that keep you very busy. And you don't miss mainstream media at all, do you?
No, not at all. And they don't miss me. No,
well, that's their problem.
I mean that. That's Ernie Courtney rule number 3. This chair in front of the mic is not yours. It belongs to the company.
So doesn't it, I think...
So don't tie your self-identity to those call letters.
So now...
But we know people who have done that recently, don't we?
Yeah, and it must feel very good
Aside
for you.
Aside from the one that you've cited.
Well, which is a tragic story there, but... It must feel very good for you that now when you go to work, you're working for Brad. It's like, I represent Brad. I am Brad. Let's work. It's you're not making money for Bell Media.
Oh, I don't mind. Either way, I was happy to make money for Bell Media as long as they're paying. I'm, doing what I'm doing, having fun. I enjoyed that experience. I really enjoyed my years at Bell Media up in Agincourt at Agincourt at McCowan Road. A great group of people that I work with. I love them. And I've got some friends, Lisa Robbins, and Debbie Hovick, people who I will have as friends for the rest of my life if I'm fortunate. There were many others like that. Dan Matheson came out of that experience as well too, So I was almost exactly 10 years with CTV News Channel. 2008 to 2018.
Wow.
And then my first go around with CTV when it was, CFTO was 1990 to 93. And I met wonderful people like Austin Delaney and Tom Hayes back in those days. Right. I was also scared during those days too. I had some of the toughest news directors there that I've ever had in my entire career. Ted Stubing, Darwin Smith, they were excellent journalists, and they were taskmasters. And they really kicked off not all of them. I still had a few more rough edges to get kicked off later when I was in the United States, but they started me on the road. And I think that's, Mike, one of the things that young journalists miss these days. They don't have farm teams to start with up in Elliott Lake and a hard-ass news director to tell them which way is up.
Right.
And they end up, in some cases, coming straight out of Ryerson and sitting in, and they're writing for the country's largest news station, and that's not fair to them.
No, because these smaller markets and
it's not fair
where
to
you
the
cut your
viewers.
teeth, right? This is where you make your mistakes, you get better, and then you go. It's like to the big leagues. You don't start.
You work your way up. Yeah, and it's just such a disservice to viewers, listeners, and to those young people starting off when, there's no one there to at a station like CTV to tell them that, there's a better way of saying this. You should do it subject, verb, object, in sentence structure. And consequently, why is there no one there to tell them how to do it well? Well, there's no one there because those people who could tell them, those people with the institutional knowledge,
right,
have been laid off. They've been victims of cost cutting by the corporation. But, once again, it comes down to a corporation. This chair is not yours.
That was some worthwhile advice you got early in your career that has stuck with you all these decades and served you very, very well. I want to shout out two websites, everybody. Get ready. One is pumpkinsafterdark.com. That's where you buy your tickets right now for the award-winning Halloween event, Pumpkins After Dark. It runs through October 31st, obviously, so get your tickets now. And I want to shout out recyclemyelectronics.ca. They're committed to our planet's future, and that means properly recycling your electronics of the past. So if you have any old electronics, old devices you want recycled, go to recyclemyelectronics.ca. Brad, I got to tell you, I was a big fan of Toronto Rocks. I'm very excited to have you on. And how was this for you? You got to see where the magic is made here. How was your experience here in your Toronto Mike debut?
This is bad. And I'll tell you why.
That's real talk.
We're 1 hour and 4 minutes into this.
Are we? No, we're longer than that.
We started earlier.
This is actually 1 hour and 26 minutes.
Oh, my Lord. This has gone past so quickly. How is this possible?
So you thought it was quickly when it was 1 hour and 4 minutes.
Yes.
When you found out it's 1 hour and 26 minutes, you're going,
oh, my God.
Listen, people.
I hope for people listening, I haven't been too damn boring.
No, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Really, it doesn't matter what the people think. It matters what I think. Okay, by the way, I want to shout out Dimitri. Dimitri sent me a note to say, I forgot to bring this up during the Toronto Rock segment, but he wanted me to ask you if you replaced John Major on Toronto Mics. And as you said so succinctly there, you don't replace John Major, but you did take over the role.
I warmed the seat for John.
John went to 1050 CHUM.
1050 CHUM.
Wow. You know what I recommend to you, Brad? If you're bored one day, go to episode 1050. That's episode 1050 of Toronto Mic.
I listened to it.
Okay.
Several of my radio gods were there in that episode, and I was thrilled.
Okay, well, listen,
it's a pretty mellow response, man.
No, man, I wasn't sure you were done there. I didn't want to trample on you, man. You're an OG, like I said.
You just sparked a memory, and then you just mellowed down into this? What's up with this?
You're an OG, Brad. And this won't be the last time we hear from you. And again, what are you doing on December 9th? You're coming over to Palma's Kitchen to hang with us listeners and the FOTMs at TMLX 14. What do you got going on?
I don't know. I'll check my calendar. Get back to you, buddy. If it's anything like this has been a real pleasure, Mike. And if it's anything like this, I'll be back.
It'll be a lot like this. Open mic. I gotta say, we'll talk more about Moby Grape at TMLX 14 because you love the taste of that Moby Grape. And Brad Giffen, I don't know this Brad Avenyou guy. That's who I hire for my voiceover work. But when I want to talk about Toronto Rocks, I got Brad Giffen in the house. Thanks for doing this, buddy. I love the nostalgia.
Truly my pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,350th show. That's a round number, Brad. 1350. Joel Goldberg didn't get a round number like that.
1350.
Yeah, almost. That's like 1050 plus 300. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. Is there somewhere in the social media universe where people could follow the ongoing adventures of Brad Giffen?
No.
No, listen, you got to talk to me if you want to get to Brad. Okay, this is how we're working here. Go to LinkedIn, actually.
Brad at avsvoice.com. Brad Giffen's on a beach.
Yeah, Marie Curtis, I think. Okay. Shout out to all those who made this possible.
Marie Curtis Park Beach.
I bike through it almost every day, so I shout out Marie Curtis Park.
And a very lovely park it is, too.
It is. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Great Lakes Brewery. You're bringing some beer home with you.
Yes,
Palma Pasta, I have a lasagna for you.
Thank you, Palma Pasta.
Raymond James Canada, you got your... Actually, they don't give you anything. Raymond James, step it up. We need to give gifts to people. But
Thank you, Ridley Funeral Home.
They gave you the measuring tape.
Yes, that's very, very handy. Thank you.
Monaris gave you the speaker.
Yes.
Pumpkins After Dark, guys. Go to pumpkinsafterdark.com. Get your tickets now. And as you said, and recycle my electronics. I got Cliff hacking here soon. As you said, Brad, shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow when my special guest is Dawn Stevenson, original member of Moby Grape.
Cool.
You didn't know you needed this deep dive, but trust me, it's great. And I actually have a special co-host for this episode, FOTM Gare Joyce. Don't miss that. That's episode 1351. See you all then.
Is coming up, rosy and gray. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and gray. Well, I've kissed you in France, and I've kissed you in Spain. And I've kissed you in places I better not name.